Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a couple exciting things happening in World of Warcraft. We're going to be talking about a couple things that I actually want to cover in today's video, but the biggest one is going to be about patch 8.2 and the actual date, more or less. We have exactly when it's going to come out, and it's exactly what I predicted. So we're going to start off with just that. Patch 8.2, Blizzard finally put up a notification that Season 2 is ending very soon. Blizzard has been doing these seasonal notifications mostly for the PvP community, but now with Mythic Plus being part of the seasonal stuff that you can do in WoW, that also accounts for that too. They stated that Season 2 is ending soon, and every time Blizzard puts up this kind of post in the past history for every PvP season that we can remember, that means you have about 2 weeks before the season ends and the new patch begins. Now, between every seasons, there is usually a 2-week delay, and with 8.2, they're not going to have a 2-week delay, then release patch 8.2 with the content. Rather, they're going to get us into patch 8.2 and then have their seasonal week delay. So we are led to believe, with this announcement of Season 2 ending, that the new patch should be coming up in 2 weeks. The fact that Blizzard said that they are just going to release patch 8.2, and then within that 8.2 patch, they will have that seasonal delay. That means that there's a really good chance that in 2 weeks, we'll have patch 8.2, 2 weeks for people to get used to the content and maybe resubscribe to the game, and then you'll have the actual content. Now, a couple different things before we really get into more topics. I understand that this is a seasonal announcement, and Blizzard does not state in those seasonal announcements that you have exactly 2 weeks before the season is over. This is simply an announcement saying that, hey, things are going to be shutting down very soon, and we're preparing for Season 3. So get all your stuff for Season 2 done. So we are going off of the information and the fact that Blizzard has usually done this kind of announcement as a 2-week notice. Usually once they put this up, 2 weeks passes, bam, we're in a new patch, or the season ends. Second, we are led to believe that 8.2 should start right after Season 2. There's nothing that says specifically that that's exactly how things are going to go, but this is what we are led to believe. So if that's not how things roll out, I'm simply going off of what we've seen in history for World of Warcraft, how devs have released content. It hasn't been like, yeah, that's exactly how we're going to do it. Here's the actual map, here's the time dates for everything, because they really do like keeping like content and that kind of information a little bit more private. But I have very little doubt that patch 8.2 is gonna be not here within 2 weeks. This is a perfect timing, and I actually called that on 25th, there could be potential that patch 8.2 is gonna be here. Reasoning because World of Warcraft is an MMO, and sometimes Blizzard as a company likes to do weird things like kind of trying to curb their competitors. What if you were able to somehow release a patch at a perfect time to curb the hype of another game, maybe another MMO, like Final Fantasy 14 expansion Shadowbringers coming out July 2nd. So for Blizzard, it makes sense to release this patch a week early, get people hooked on patch 8.2 with all the different content between Nazar, Mechagon, dungeons, and eventually raids, get people starting to farm AP and gearing out the character and grinding out loot. And once you've already done this for a week, it feels like, wow, it feels so weird to just give up on this process, forget about it, and leave it alone, and just jump into a brand new game for a brand new expansion. So it makes sense for Blizzard to maybe do this in order to kind of steal the hype away from another game, while also kind of leveraging more of the World of Warcraft hype, still being probably one of the most popular MMOs, if not the most popular in the game. So very excited about patch 8.2. There's a lot of stuff coming out, but I'm mostly excited for the brand new content, brand new zones, re-gearing of even my main character, involving the necklace essences in order to craft our classes, and all of it that comes with it. I'll probably make a video covering all the patch 8.2 stuff that you can do as soon as we actually have access to the raids and the dungeons and heroic war fronts and what that is all about in future videos. And there's more stuff for me to talk about for patch 8.2. Tomorrow I'll probably do a video talking about more class changes, so be tuned in for that. Next, we're going to get really quickly into a little bit of news that's not World of Warcraft, or World of Warcraft news that usually doesn't make the rounds on this channel. First of all, if you're someone who did the COS storyline where you got the gift of Nazar, which is the big purple eyeball above your head. And if you decided to keep it on your head as not a toy, but rather as a cosmetic piece, replacing your helmet, then if you were to go near Naga settlements right now, that means any Naga world quest that might appear, then you should hear whispers of Nazar, or some sort of evil whispers. I think that was supposed to be one of those things to kind of make us believe that, hey, 8.2 should be coming up very soon, but it started happening earlier than this Tuesday. It started happening actually a couple of days. People started noticing it, thinking, okay, maybe that's supposed to be a thing, but it just didn't really line up. If this lined up on a Tuesday with a reset, then it would have been like, yes, we know for sure that the patch is coming up. Or maybe it would have been something more gradual, like at first you heard a very faint whisper and then it got louder as the weeks progressed. Then I think it's something we actually might have been able to kind of derive. And Blizzard was more open with how they did stuff like that back in Legion. There was a lot of casters, for example, all over the Broken Shore that had this insanely long channeling time at one point. So then people put their heads together to try to figure out when this channeling is supposed to finish, and then we had a date, and with that date, it was a time that coincided with a patch release for World of Warcraft. I believe it was the patch that gave us Antorus and all the broken areas on Argus. I believe, I could have been wrong though. That did start in TOS, so it could have been some patch or another. But it was one of those things that was more obvious. With this headpiece thing, I don't know if it was obvious or not, although it is kind of cool if you like the whole idea, or maybe if you like to roleplay as a Shadow Priest and do the whole voidy thing as a Void Elf, for example. That could be quite a little bit of fun. If you haven't gotten down your character, you can still do the quest line on an alt and just make sure not to take off the headpiece so you can hear more. And actually, I would even recommend for a lot of people, if you do have an alt, grab that head thing and listen for any kind of whispers in the future for patches if you want to be the first one to catch maybe something new or weird happening. Pretty sure we'll have interesting interactions in the Azhara's Palace. Next, we're going to talk about not World of Warcraft, but rather another game that Blizzard apparently was working on at one point or another and completely abandoned it to work on other titles that some of you guys might be happy about. Now, this is a World of Warcraft channel mostly, so I'm just going to touch on this a little bit. I didn't want to mention it, and I didn't want to say my thoughts on it, but we're just going to go by this really quickly. Blizzard apparently was working on a StarCraft title that was supposed to be a first-person shooter. Very little detail in terms of how it was going to function, although I have a couple ideas. What if it wasn't your traditional Call of Duty shooter, but rather a first-person shooter from perspective of, let's say, Terrans with all the Marines, or maybe the Protoss getting up in melee, or maybe from the point of view of a Zerg. Either way, that whole project was canned, and instead, apparently, it was put up to information that Blizzard developers instead dedicated more time into Diablo 4, which I guess should be a good thing, and Overwatch 2. Not really sure what that means. Couple thoughts. I actually would have loved an idea of a StarCraft universe in a first-person shooter. I'm someone who hasn't played StarCraft in quite a while, and I feel like there's so much more that could be explored from a first-person perspective. Kind of like when somebody was saying that maybe they should make a StarCraft MMO, and I think they were trying to make a StarCraft MMO from a more hands-on approach to really see the big, giant enemies, to see just how menacing and massive they are. I think it would have been amazing. Now, in terms of Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2, let's talk a little bit about that. I'm hoping Diablo 4, they really do mean the game title, not some sort of a project name. You see, a game can sometimes have one title, but they also can have a whole another project name. So you can have a project named Bob, but in the end it comes out to like StarCraft universe, Area 53, whatever the hell you want to call your game, but whatever similar games did stuff like that. Like Anthem, for example, had a different name before it became a trash heap. So when they're talking about Diablo 4, I really do hope they mean Diablo 4, not kind of like, oh, Diablo the 4th edition, and they're talking about Diablo Immortal, because after the reaction that everybody gave them, all the BS that everybody gave them over Diablo Immortal, I'm really hoping they're canning that project or just working on it silently away from any of the consumers that actually want it, and will never release it to any of the long-term supporters of a company that makes PC games. And for Overwatch 2, again, it could be any of those things. It could be an actual iteration of Overwatch, although I feel like Overwatch is still pretty young in terms of its lifespan. I know that the hype for Overwatch started dying recently, but I don't believe it is because of some issue with the game, but I really think it's more with the developers and where they're taking the game towards. But to make Overwatch 2, I don't really know if that'll be enough to kind of resurge in a hype. I don't think Blizzard is actually working on an Overwatch 2. Maybe either a side project for Overwatch, like some sort of a mobile game, could be a possibility, or just maybe an expansion to Overwatch or some rather. I think that could be a potential possibility. Maybe it's just some sort of a massive free patch with a bunch of new heroes and more stuff to do in Overwatch, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Lastly, Blizzard is doing some more tuning to some of the dungeons for BFA, and some of the tuning kind of buffs the dungeons. Like for example, Nazar Priestess Alunza, which is the gold boss, she doesn't do any damage, so most people just pull things with her. They are gonna buff her so she actually does a little bit more damage. I don't think it's gonna make that much of a difference. It'll simply mean that, hey, her abilities where you have to dispel or dodging the corrupted gold, that actually makes a difference, and grabbing tainted blood at the very last moment is actually going to be more of a thing. But for the most part, I don't think anyone is going to have any hard time with it. They also are changing some of the fights and some of the bosses where the damage for certain abilities is going to be way too much. The most controversial one is a change to Tol Dagor, where the heavy cannon will only have 5 uses out of it. So people can't just run to the cannons and just spam the living hell out of them in order to win the dungeon. Instead, you'll have to use those cannon blasts properly and accurately so you don't waste them. It's going to be a very interesting change, but for the most part, it seems like overall, it's going to be mostly good changes to majority of the content, because some of the damage and some of the abilities just didn't really make that much sense. But definitely Blizzard is trying to keep it fresh and keep it entertaining. Lastly, I want to thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Very much appreciate anybody in support. If you guys want to see more stuff in 8.2 or me covering any aspects of the game, let me know in the comments below. I interact with the community on a regular basis, but if you still feel like maybe the comments are a little slow, you can just hit me up in DMs either on Twitter, which I use regularly, or straight up on Discord, where we have just about everybody hanging out there all the time. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for the amazing support, and hopefully patch 8.2 is going to be a very, very interesting patch. I'm going to go for now, and tomorrow I'm going to make a video on class updates. We got a couple more, and I want to talk about some of the biggest ones, like change to shamans with the lightning lasso. Interested? Hopefully. So stay tuned. Thank you guys, and I'll see all of you in another video.